really making sure you understand your consumer and you're seeking a strong insight. In journalism parlance, that would be your peg, right? So really, what is the hook of your story? What is the angle that you're going for? That's the weird part about career journeys, right? Is you don't know how things add up. It's a compounding effect, right? So you don't realize where your past experience can compound into a bigger opportunity for you. The question they always ask is, how do I get to Netflix, or how do I get to Duolingo, or how do I get to even Vice, right? Like, global brands have this certain layer of aspiration to them. But what I say is that, like, look at each stage in your career as a stepping stone, right? I didn't get a job at any of these companies at day one, which was the last season of Money Heist. I enjoyed that because it was just such a big show, right? It was a show that was just loved by Indians. I enjoyed working on Stranger Things. We did a massive projection on the Gateway of India, which I think was just to be able to do that, I think was a special moment. One that comes to mind is the most recent campaign I've been running for the Duolingo English Test, which is a collaboration with the movie Dunki, SRK and Red Chilli's film. And what was interesting for us was the connection between study abroad landscape, right? It talks about migrating to London, and it talks about our competitors in the movie, right? Which is very rare to see a movie kind of talking about the English proficiency testing space.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the MI podcast. As I had told you in the previous episode, we are going to have a bit of a series on content marketing. So, we are living in the digital age, the information age. Anything which you are kind of buying, which ranges from, say, 100 rupees to even a lakh of rupees, we kind of research it, we Google it, we see videos, we look at various e commerce platforms. So, the consumer today is very well informed, and whenever he's taking any kind of decision, he'll do a lot of research, he'll look at different places, reviews and everything. So as a business, as a marketer working for a business, your products and services are going to be highly researched, the content about them. Also, within your industry, when you're talking about certain things, you're educating. Like I say about content, there are three things: you're educating, informing, and entertaining as well. So your content has to be kind of in all the three, domains. So a content marketing journey starts from identifying a customer persona, what will kind of they look at, they read about it, what all information they are kind of gathering, and where do we come along in this particular journey. So today, joining me on discussing content marketing and a very interesting journey that she has had in a career from journalism all the way to content marketing. I have with me Tara. Hi Tara, how are you?
Hi, Nikhil. Nice to meet you. Thanks for
Awesome.
having me.
Yes, Tara. It's great having you. So where are you joining us from?
I'm in Mumbai. I work from home, and right now just doing this virtually from my house.
That's right. That's right. So Tara, your journey has been interesting. Like obviously, I look at the people on LinkedIn and I kind of reach out to them. I see their profile. Where all they have worked, what all. So I find quite interesting in your journey of you starting off. In journalism, I think you started off in Times Network, and then where if we have even observed in the last 10 years how it's kind of journalism and content have then kind of seeped into marketing. So then that explains like your journeys and then Vice and then Netflix and now today Duolingo English Test. So you can just share with the audience your kind of your journey in terms of you what you had studied and then how you gone into journalism.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I think when I was in school was when I first got interested in the media industry. So I was the editor of my school newspaper, my school yearbook, and that was probably my favorite thing to do at school. I spent so much time after school hours working on the paper, working on those kind of things, and in my mind, because when you're in school, it's pretty black and white in terms of what that means, right? So I was like, oh, because I'm the editor of my school paper, it means that journalism is what I want to do.
Hmm.
So that was kind of the
But was it
mindset.
you were kind of inspired, like you should see these presenters on television in the news channels? Were you like inspired with them? That was like the first point
No,
of
it
view, kind
wasn't
of.
that. Like I said, it was the whole process of putting the newspaper together, right? So
Hmm.
when you're the editor of the paper, you're in charge of everything, right? So
Hmm.
you're sort of planning the production, you're planning what story goes out and when, you're planning who's doing which story, you're checking and fact checking and doing all of the research. You're then putting it together and doing the production and making sure you're hitting your deadlines, right? I think that's the part that I found more exciting than looking at a TV report, or it wasn't
Hmm.
that. So I think, like I said, when you're in school, you just look at the fact that
Hmm.
it's a newspaper and you put one and one together, and you're like, oh, I was
That's
the
right.
editor of my
So
newspaper,
maybe at
so I
least
want.
reading part of it, like that interests you when you are reading how are these articles made, or how do you kind
No,
of
I would say it's the production side, right? So I think what I
okay,
liked was the deadlines, and I liked the production angle,
okay.
and that's what I was trying to come to, right? Like, so when you're in, like, for me at that point, I thought journalism was what I wanted to do, and that's what I studied, right? So after school, that's what I pursued in my college and things like that. But as I progressed in journalism, and I did journalism for about 6 years, I realized that actually my interests and my skill sets, which were still those foundations that I built while I was the editor of my school paper, was more leaning towards production and creative, right? So I think the parts that I found more interesting, which I thought was journalism, actually suited the marketing and advertising industry more. So that
Hmm.
transition was something that I started looking to do as I started working, because that's when I had a lot more clarity on what else there is out there, right? When you're in
Hmm.
school, you don't necessarily have as much perspective on the volume of different kinds of careers that exist, and obviously kids
Hmm.
today are a lot more receptive and have a lot more information. But
Hmm.
and obviously when we were younger, we didn't have that level of like being able to search for everything on the internet, and like we didn't have that much engagement with people. Social media platforms were just about coming up when I was in school, right?
Hmm.
So you didn't have as much access to actually know what different kinds of careers exist out there. And yeah, I think if I had more clarity when I was younger, I would have probably
Hmm.
been in advertising and marketing a lot
That's
earlier.
right.
But
Today it's
yeah,
it's kind of the reverse. Like you have one over this thing of information, and you kind of like you like there's more confusion now. Like what you kind of choose.
yeah,
Everything is kind of out there, and the information is there, and there are a lot of like on social media. It's kind of highlighted. Any kind of success is over exaggerated also. So you can get it's now kind of become reverse now for the particular people, but still now it's good that that information, like those who want to kind of use it properly, and like and there's so many, like you can explore so many things, right? Like in your time,
yeah,
I think journalism was just you had to kind of you have to join a news channel or something. Today you can be you have your own channel and be a kind of a journalist, and at least start off
yeah,
in that.
absolutely. There's so many different ways of exploring things. There's so many new avenues that have opened up. So, um, agree with you.
That's right. So Tara, your how do you feel like, because then after your Times Network journey, you went to Wise. So it was where do you feel like you got that particular opportunity? Was there any reason like it was, or was it like your complete change of profile, or there was some overlap that your journalistic skills was then coming into marketing?
Actually, before Vice, I did a stint in advertising. So
Okay.
when I was a journalist, I was covering a show called Brand Equity, which was a show that covered marketing and advertising.
Hmm.
And for me, that was like my crash course in marketing and advertising, because I was getting to meet the who's who in the industry. I was able to learn a lot from them in terms of marketing insights, what makes good creative, and what makes campaigns work, what makes some campaigns not work, all of that. So for me, I think that was this stepping stone. But it's very difficult to have somebody take a punt on you when you haven't had that work experience. So I was a
Hmm.
journalist for about 6 years, and then wanted to make a transition to basically either advertising or marketing. And I applied to tons of jobs at that point. But the unfortunate part is a lot of people don't want to take a risk and a chance if you
Hmm.
don't have that relevant work experience, right? It's a chicken and egg situation almost, right? But
That's right.
at that point,
Especially in
there was
your career, when you are a little bit like 7 6 7 years into your career, then there is even more apprehension for no reason, I know.
yeah,
Because I mean, even if you're ready to take a bit of a salary drop or something like that, even then there is that bias that no,
yeah,
we'll take a newer person, because maybe I don't know, your fixed ideas or whatever, I don't there is some prejudice against you for no reason.
Yeah, and I guess it's because ultimately people want people with experience, but they
Yeah,
also want very specific experience, and
yeah,
I think there needs to be a little more openness in terms of what you're looking for as a skill set, and sometimes it coming from a different industry can work, right? But anyway, at that point, I went through a series of applications, and then finally got an opportunity with a digital startup that was focused on content marketing at in the advertising side. So I did that job for about 4 years before I started getting global opportunities, because that really set the foundation for me in terms of really proving that I can make campaigns. And when I was advertising side, on the advertising side, I was able to sort of create that proof that I can actually do this, right? So worked with a bunch of global brands while I was at this agency, and then did that for about 4 years, and then transitioned to Vice.
that's right.
Um,
The
yeah.
work you did for global brands, was it in the international market or within the Indian market only?
Mostly in the Indian market, but some of it was, in the US, and some of it was in Singapore, but primarily in India. So we did a lot of work for brands like Red Bull, Absolute, YouTube. So we helped YouTube with their creator program,
Hmm.
Twitter
At
at
that time,
that
I think
point.
it was coming up. It was just about they were
Yeah,
launching those. That's right. That's right.
yeah.
Awesome. What advice would you give? Like we guys also, like, we are presenting on marketing. We're talking about things in the industry. What would you, give tips for people who are making content in marketing and advertising industry?
So I think for me, a lot of the skill sets that I developed as a journalist were the ones that really help with content marketing.
Hmm.
And I think the core one that marketers should follow is really making sure you understand your consumer and you're seeking a strong insight. In journalism parlance, that would be
Hmm.
your peg, right? So really, what is the hook of your story? What is the angle that you're going for?
Hmm.
And then how are you telling that story, right? So
Hmm.
I think carving a really strong insight for the audience you're trying to speak to is what will build a really compelling piece of content marketing, because the insight will come from your audience and it'll be something that's relevant to them, and then from there you can actually create a really compelling story. So I think that's the part that I think is sometimes lacking in campaigns, because when a lot of marketers try to put out something, they want to check all the boxes or they want to speak to everybody. But when you try speaking to everybody, you're not really speaking to anyone, right? So it's kind of
Hmm.
really finding the priority market that you want to go after, understanding them really well, finding an insight, and then building a compelling creative story around that. So that would be my core advice.
That's right. No, but Tara, in terms of, let's say, the journalism aspect of it, like, so, what as a, so the target audience is a marketer. It could be at any kind of level. Let's take a mid-level to upper. Somebody who's a CMO. So these guys are like your TG. So, what would you suggest in terms of the content creation aspect of it? Where, say, you are reviewing a certain campaign, or you are talking about a certain trend that is happening with respect to a lot of campaigns following that. So, what would your advice in general, not like a specific content piece per se, like what you maybe have learned, like what connects with that this kind of audience?
Yeah, I think that's what I said, right? Like
Yeah.
when you're writing a story as a journalist, you're looking for what your headline is or what your peg is, right?
Hmm.
That if you took that ideology of how you come to what your headline is, which is the hook of your story, or sort of what you're building your narrative around, that if you take it to marketing, or the marketing side of it is your insight.
Hmm.
So that's my point, is that the way you would look for a hook or a peg or a headline in a journalism story or an article that you're putting out,
Hmm.
take that same mindset and put it towards marketing. When
Hmm.
you put it towards marketing, that's what creates the premise of your insight, and then that's what you build your campaign around. So that's the connection, that's the overlap.
That's right. Tara, so about content marketing now, I think your current role also is like purely within that. And I've observed, like, as a B2B marketer over, let's say, the last 5 years, if you take a percentage, first of all, it started at, say, 10% that our activities are into content marketing. Today, I can say it's even 60-70% is what we are doing is into content marketing. So, how do you feel this transition within the industry and the increasing importance of designing original content and building a community with that content? How is it? Would you like tell that to the audience?
Yeah, I wanted to go back to what you were saying in the beginning of this conversation, right? Which
Mm,
was that there's so much information out there, right? Like it's such a cluttered world right now in terms of what's available on the internet, at the touch of a button, right? And there's more and more content being created every day. There's billions and billions of, searches going out. There's all of that, right? So for brands today to remain relevant, one is you have to stand out among all of that clutter, and you on top of that have to make people care, right? That's what builds brands. So when you think of all the strongest brands in the world, whether it's Apple, whether it's Nike, whether it's Netflix, whether it's anybody, right? Like the strength that they have is a very strong brand, and the brand is built on really powerful, compelling content that makes people care. There's a reason you want to buy a Nike shoe over other brands out there, right? Because it really makes you feel like an athlete. And that's because they've hammered that narrative that everyone's an athlete from day one in terms of how they've built their campaign
mm,
architecture, right? So not only will they celebrate the best athletes in the world, but they will celebrate you as an individual who's taking your first run or doing your first workout, right? And the way that's built out is with content marketing, right? So they really understand who their core target audience is, and they keep building narratives around it. But ultimately, they've remained consistent with everything that they've tried to say, right? So they've never steered away from the fact that they believe that everyone's an athlete. They've never moved away from that in the years and years that they've existed as a brand. But the creative way that they've said that message has adapted. And I think that's what's required, right? With a lot of marketers, you feel like you always need to say something new, and you feel like every time you run a new campaign, you need to go back to the drawing board and come up with a new tagline, a new creative articulation, right? But sometimes what you've landed on right in the beginning is what works. And if you're creatively consistently continuing to say that same message, you will actually create a really powerful brand, as long as you're in the space that your consumers care and what they care about.
that's right. Tara, in terms of like your social media strategy, how do you kind of design that? Like here again, like a journalism aspect where you are, say, building your stories. Today, we in content, it is about, building like a series. You're talking about something, or you having like a collab, like you can have interviews and all that. So, how do you like when you are the CMO of a company, your content or social media strategy? Generally, what are your kind of best practices, or how do you kind of majorly design the thing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think a lot of it is like you said, based on journalism, right?
Yeah,
So in a lot of companies, actually, they've started calling social media roles editorial roles,
yeah.
because there's an editorial angle that needs to come into social media, right? If you're
Hmm.
just trying to put out ads on social media, you're not necessarily going to drive too much impact.
Hmm.
But what works on social media is what people are looking for, right? Like, so either search led content that explains things and explainer content, or stuff that is just in the space of what people use social media for, right? Which is either to seek information, find entertainment, uh, be more informed, all of that, right? So for me, for instance, I currently work at the Duolingo English Test, which is a testing product. It's like the IELTS and TOEFL when it comes to a proficiency test that you need to take when you're studying abroad. I can't just talk about my test on social media, right? So what can I talk about? I can talk about studying abroad. I can talk about the space of studying abroad, because that's what students are searching for. And then I can talk about how my product is relevant, right? So as we build social media strategies out, I think you need to look at what is the editorial landscape that you operate in, and what is it that your audience is seeking, right? So
Hmm.
when somebody's purchasing my product, they're seeking to study abroad. They want to sort of follow their dreams and achieve a big milestone in their life, right? It's a very important moment. So one is, whatever I'm putting out cannot be frivolous. It needs to
Hmm.
sort of really try like tie into that seriousness of this decision that somebody's making, and the fact that it's a very difficult, time consuming, stressful process. And once I do that and identify that, I can sort of build out how my product can help, because That's what a student is looking for. They're looking for something that is making that process a little easier for them and a little less stressful. And that's the playground for my brand, for example. I'm just using this as an example. Obviously, this works for any brand out there. So if you look at Netflix, for example, the job of Netflix is to entertain people, right? So whether it's on Netflix or off Netflix, the objective of the company is to entertain. So you see content on the platform that's entertaining, but on social media also, the brand is there to entertain you. So it's like if I have
That's
30
right.
seconds
So Tara, we'll
and
come
yeah.
to that in the next. Like, firstly, we'll want to know your journey within Netflix, wherein you getting an opportunity there, your profile, and then we'll get into some interesting work you did there.
Yeah, so for me, I joined Netflix first as a social media manager, where I was looking into things like social media, right? Like
Hmm.
for some shows, series, things
Hmm.
like that. But also building Netflix's editorial voice, right? So
Hmm.
I think the fact that I did have a journalism background
Hmm.
plus an advertising marketing background worked really well for this role because
That, and
um,
also at the point of where you were in terms of being hired for the talent, that is what was really considered. That background of yours that you already
yes,
had
that
in this, yeah,
combination was very strong, right? So,
combination, yeah,
sometimes it works, right? Like, so
yeah,
that's the weird part about career journeys, right? Is you don't
yeah,
know how things add up. It's a compounding effect,
yeah.
right? So you don't realize where your past experience can compound into a bigger opportunity for you, right?
Hmm.
So for me, that combination of having both an advertising background as well as an editorial journalism background
Hmm.
really worked for me for that
That's right.
particular
Yeah.
role at
Tara, this
Netflix.
is like a for a audience and a young person, like in certain role they have which they are not really satisfied in. They always are seeking something, better. This is a important lesson. What you are doing, at least focus on that, try to do a great job. Some things will
Yeah,
turn out which will be much
absolutely.
better with the skill that you are getting in that thing what you're doing currently. So that's a
And
great
that's
lesson.
something that so a lot of people reach out to me for mentorship as well. And the question they always ask is, how do I get to Netflix, or how do I get to Duolingo, or how do I get to even
Hmm.
Vice, right? Like global brands have this certain layer of aspiration to them. But what I say is that, like, look at each stage in your career as a stepping stone, right? I didn't get a job at any of these companies at day one. I got
Hmm.
it after working for about 10, 15 years, right? And
Hmm.
over that period of time, I've built I've built spaces to showcase my skill set. And through those opportunities, I've been able to shine because I've kind of built those opportunities for myself, right? So when somebody asks me, how do I get from here to here? I sometimes tell them that there might be three steps in the middle. That doesn't mean you can't get to where you want to be, but you need to take a couple more steps before you get there, right? So for me, from my journalism job, I would have not gotten Netflix immediately. I
Hmm.
needed the advertising job, I needed the job advice to be able to build that foundation to get a job at Netflix, right? So that's three steps away from where I was as a journalist, right? So it's not like it happened overnight.
Yeah.
It's over a progression of time.
Yeah. That's right. So, Tara, your profile specifically, like how did you started off in social media? Then I think you were into the lead and film marketing within
Yeah.
that. So,
So
but like
sorry.
for this, see, honestly, the OTT getting like a marketing job in OTT, still people don't know actually day to day what are you kind of doing. So, like you could kind of shed light on that.
Yeah, I mean, the job at OTT platforms is very similar to film marketing, right? So,
Hmm.
what a Red Chilies, what a Dharma, what any of these big production houses do out there, it's similar, right? You're launching a film or a show, and you're building a campaign around that, right? So, when you look at any OTT platform, they're not necessarily shouting out loud that, we're a platform. They're talking about whatever their new release is, right?
That's
So it's always a new launch, and it's always kind of creating an individual launch campaign for whatever film or movie or series is releasing. So very very similar model to entertainment marketing in general. So you put out a trailer, you cut the posters, you have a media plan. You put out billboards, you do the whole thing. um, but yeah, it's a 360 campaign approach, and then you work very closely with the production house that's created the show, or the show or film. You work with the talent, and you're the person that's kind of trying to get everyone to rally behind the campaign that you're putting together.
right. Tara, there's kind of a similarity between when you say an event marketing and marketing for a particular movie or an OTT, because end of the day, for like a movie also, those initial 3 4 days are what kind of, you have the, it has to peak, the attention or the desire to see that movie has to be the peak at that time. It's just similar to like you have an event which is over 3 days, and even OTT, I would say the first 7 days only, like you guys have to really look at coming on that show. So do you feel there's also that similarity where even people in the event space look at, then they get into the movie marketing, or it's
I think
easier
it's
for them?
a little longer than events because
Yeah.
I think event marketing, like I think event marketing is a part of entertainment marketing, but it doesn't um, it's not necessarily the same, right? Like I
Hmm.
think it's a small part of what you do when you're doing an entertainment marketing campaign. You will always have an event strategy along with it,
Hmm.
but it goes a lot longer than just a weekend or 7 days. It's
Hmm.
actually draws out over months, right? Like because think of
Hmm.
consumers'
No,
behavior. Not
when
everyone.
that's real. No, I'm not saying when it's released. I'm talking. So the build-up is 2 2 months. So even if you have a major event, you might have a build-up of 2 months. All the activities towards
Yeah,
that.
that's a good way to say it. Yeah, so
Yeah.
you're talking. You're not saying it's like creating the event itself. You're talking about the
Yeah.
build up to.
Build up and all the activity. That's right. That's right. So Tara, your then specifically any of the series or movies that you marketed on the platform, anything innovative you did there, you want to tell the viewers?
Um, I think for me, and I think a few people would have heard this already, is I think my favorite campaign there was working on Money Heist, which was the last season of Money Heist, and I enjoyed that because it was just such a big show, right? It was a show that was just loved by Indians, had a lot of fandom, and it was the goodbye season, right? So it was the time that you really got to celebrate fandom, and you didn't need to necessarily build storyline, right?
Hmm.
So for me, the campaign was all about India celebrating Money Heist, and the line that we went with was India Bole Chao, right? So it was
Hmm.
India saying goodbye to this legendary Spanish show that ended up feeling very desi, right? Which is why we
Hmm.
brought in a lot of local celebrities. We brought in, like we did Jaldi Hours and Anthem. We localized in many, many languages. So I think that whole coming together of um Indians celebrating a Spanish show but making it feel desi was what made that campaign really special. And I think in that process, we also were able to establish that even though it's a Spanish show, it's dubbed in a lot of Indian languages. And if you want to watch it in Telugu, you can. If you want to watch it in Hindi, in Tamil, all those options are available to you. And it was really good to see how that show sort of did in the market, and then the kind of fandom that went out on social media afterwards, right? We saw very strong love from the audiences on social media platforms, and it was great to see.
That's right. Awesome. So, any one other one you would like to talk about?
I mean, there were tons, right? Like, so when you work at Netflix, you're
Yeah.
pretty much launching something every other week, right? So most shows are special. I enjoyed working on Stranger Things. We did a massive projection on the Gateway of India, which I think was just to be able to do that. I think was a special moment. To really one is because it wasn't easy as a project, right? Like, so really the logistics of trying to make something like that happen, and then finally seeing that coming to light, I think was super exciting. But also what worked really nicely for that was that there were projections on massive monuments across the world, right? So this was a moment of all the countries that were promoting Stranger Things across the world coming together. And I really enjoyed that because it felt like you were part of a massive global company, and being able to see a projection on the Empire State of Build State, the Empire State Building, on monuments all over, and then sort of seeing it then at home on the gateway. I think that was special.
Okay, so Tara, the you can say media entertainment industry with internet digital, it's so many vast changes and different ways the business is done over the last 10 years. You've seen like production companies coming up who are making content specifically with influencers or kind of a series or branded content and all that. So how have you seen the evolution with like the internet charges going down, the consumption increasing, 10, 20 times, and the industry, how it's serving out their content and monetizing it. Like, what have you observed?
Looked at as a value add and not important, so it's crazy how things have shifted from there to now, where now digital is the primary medium, it's the most important, so I think that was the biggest shift that I've sort of gone through, where you've seen this massive shift from TV to digital, where you cannot not do a digital campaign, but you could maybe or maybe not do TV, right? Which 10 years ago was not the case at all. It was always TV first and then digital as an add on or digital as an extension. So
Hmm.
I think that is the biggest change that I've seen, number one. The second is I just think the pace of the industry itself, right? Because of the amount of volume of content out there, people just move fast, right? Like um, there's massive creatives that are going out in record time. Movies are made so quickly now because of digitalization and things like that, right? And uh, I think what's also happened is people have become a lot more nimble. Earlier, people were a lot more stubborn about like this is the way it's done, so this is the way it should continue to be done.
Hmm.
And I think now people are much more open to experimentation and being like, hey, this hasn't been tried before, the
Hmm.
world is evolving, let's try it, let's see where things are going. I think those are some of the biggest changes. I think there's a level of insecurity with where things are going as well, because you never know what's going to come next, right? So that insecurity, I think, also builds creative, and it makes people willing to try new things, um, and willing to take a few more risks, right? And I think those are some of the big changes that I've seen over the course of my career. We're already seeing the massive shifts that AI is causing in the industry as well. That seems to be the next big shift for the industry, because you're seeing creative like music, art, imagery being able to be churned out within seconds, right? And
Hmm.
that and how we use that, how that evolves, will be really interesting to watch. But that's probably the next
That's right.
big shift.
So Tara, but in with AI, how do you feel artists now when you are seeing things being written, your content? You can write an article, a very detailed article, very easily, or create an artwork very easily, with just prompts and all. How do you feel going forward for artists? Their relevance, or how they evolve with the people using AI in getting really good products or services in that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be a level of like legal moderation that's going to need to come into play,
Hmm.
because with IP, with all of that kind of stuff, there's going to need to be more that's brought in, and obviously that hasn't been built into our ecosystem yet because we didn't know this was something that was going to happen. So I
Hmm.
definitely think some processes will be set for
Hmm.
how that works, but I also think there's going to be two kinds of shifts, and these are just assumptions I'm making. But one will be, yes, certain kind of creative will be mass produced by AI, but there will be a lot more value given to slow forms of art, right? When we look back in history, we celebrate some of the old forms of art that no longer exist, but they have so much more value today because of the craft and the time and the style that doesn't exist anymore, right? So I feel like that value will increase for artists, and the more they hone their skills, the more specialized they become, they actually might become more in demand. So I
Hmm.
don't think it's all gloom and doom, but I
Hmm.
definitely think there needs to be more management from a legal and processes perspective, which will come into play.
That's right.
I think kind of open to that.
That's right. Yeah, that's why a personalization is so much more important. Like, if even you have a singer now, if you have with AI, a voice being recreated, his main revenue sources are the events and the interaction he has with an audience. They are ready to this thing. So they have to now look at where they're building that community, a very strong connect with them, and there's a personal some interactions where you kind of monetize it. So yeah, you have to go along how the industry is going. um, Tara, yeah, we've also observed a lot of these influencer marketing companies coming up, right? And a lot of production companies, they're actually talent management, because maybe of maybe movies or they produce content, they're not making that much. So it's something like they become virtually like most of the revenue stream is into talent management, which is basically getting them deals through their social media or whatever to showcase, and also events. And also, do you feel this kind of shift also somewhere in the industry where you there's more talent management and getting gigs for influencers or celebrities?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's just too much clutter,
Hmm.
which is actually like there's going to be some level of consolidation because,
Yeah,
like you're saying, there's an influencer agency left, right, and center. And after a point, you're like, I don't think there's enough influencers that these companies are managing, right? There's just more companies than they are talent, right?
that
So I think there will be some level of consolidation because it's impossible for this to be sustainable for a long period of time. Even just in terms of the number of agencies, the number of like, it's like every agency somebody's broken off and then started their own, and then from there another people like another group of people have started their
that's
own, right? Like, it's just this like I don't know, it's this crazy burst of companies that have started existing, and
that's right.
um, I do think there will be a lot of consolidation going ahead because it's going to
That's
be
right.
hard to.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, it's something I feel even how we are going in terms of economy. Like when people having that confidence then to start the company and take that risk, and a good business, setup scenario now you have. It's more easier to set up business and get funding and that thing. So it's in a positive way. Also, it's a good thing. And you will, in terms of people who are really up there in talent like you all, then you have options in front of you, right? Compared to then just kind of working for that company, maybe not having the best profile, just getting by in that. So yeah, there are options, and I think it does kind of have to evolve. Tara, we'll then talk about like from Netflix. It was surprising that then you went to Duolingo English test because there was no relation between the two companies at all in different industries only. So how did you make that decision, and then your profile in that?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things. One is there are threads. There's always threads that connect these decisions, right? So for me, ultimately, I am speaking to the same audience or a very very similar audience. I'm just speaking to them at a different touch point in their lives, right? So when you look at Netflix, I'm trying to speak to my consumer base when I want to entertain them. But when I'm at Duolingo English Test, like I said, I'm trying to speak to them at that one really, really pivotal moment in their life when they're considering a life changing opportunity of studying abroad, right? Which is a very, very big decision. It's an expensive decision. It requires a lot of planning. It requires a lot of process. It's very stressful. There's, like you said, an information overload out there. And students are going through like a lot of stress to make things happen, right? So while the audience is the same, the way you speak to them and the business opportunity is very different. But that's one. The second similarity is ultimately it's consumer tech, right? So the fact that both Netflix and Duolingo are consumer tech companies, they're both disruptors in their businesses. I think it's really interesting. For the Duolingo English test, it's a massive disruptor in the English proficiency testing space, which hasn't seen a digital product come into light. And I found that super interesting in terms of what what the company is doing and what the product is doing, because it's really opened up access to education to students around the world. It has such a great product market fit for India. So I was really excited by that challenge, right? And then the role itself is I'm leading the marketing efforts for Duolingo English Test in India. So I love the combination of having a startup sort of role in a global ecosystem, right? So I'm building the team from scratch. I'm sort of building the market strategy. And I think that entire process has been really exciting. And then I think the last part of why I've made that shift was it's actually a product that really believes in doing meaningful work, and making education accessible is the mission that Duolingo has as a company, whether it's the language learning app or the English test. And the company lives and breathes that, right? So working with a company that has a very strong mission was something that I was really motivated by. So
That's it.
little over a year now, it's been super exciting.
That's it. So Tara, how do you describe the main TG of for Duolingo English test?
It's a study abroad audience, right?
Hmm.
So it's either undergrad or graduate, like students considering undergrad or graduate
Hmm.
studies abroad, usually in English speaking in countries. From India, we obviously see a very large volume of STEM students and STEM aspirants. But yeah, it's a college going cohort that's considering
Hmm.
study abroad. And in
But
India,
this
we
would
see
be
a lot.
even for people who, are from a good English medium school. Even for them, it's kind of relevant in terms of the test that will be,
Yeah,
because
so
that's a
most colleges, exactly. So
yeah,
most colleges abroad have a requirement for English proficiency testing. So
yeah.
whether you
So
go,
even if a
so
person is say from a big city and he is studied in a
yes,
this
you would need to take a.
convent, also still you would this would be relevant to you.
Yes. So the thing is, with some schools, you'd get
Yeah.
waivers. So, like
Hmm.
IB schools, for example, you could get a waiver, but it's few and far between, right?
Hmm.
And a lot of students, even if they're from top schools, will still take a proficiency test just to make sure they're checking all the boxes because it is a
Hmm.
requirement for students from India at most international colleges.
Awesome. So, Tara, I wanted to ask you, important thing about user retention. See, I'm like a B2B marketer. I'm like, say, working for a SaaS product company. So, retaining the people also is kind of an important part, that you retain your particular audience month on, because these are who are paying month on month for a service. You have to cross sell, upsell to them. Also major e-commerce or aggregation platforms, you want that user, because getting the user, they say no, the getting a cost of getting maybe it's 5 times more than retaining. So what are the challenges, and still it's a very competitive market, so what are the challenges you feel are there, and how do you overcome them?
Yeah, so I think a couple of parts is just how you use notifications, right? So reminders and just those kind of indicators is a good way, depending on the kind of product you have. I think for my product, which is the DT, it's really interesting because it's actually a one-time purchase, right? You typically buy one test, you take it, it gets you admission into the college or school you want to go to, and then you're done, right? And then we have to start from scratch to get that whole new consumer base running. But what is the harder part for us from a user retention perspective is it's usually a 1 year journey that somebody goes from consideration to purchase, right? So we have to keep finding repeat touch points to be able to retain that lead and
Hmm.
transform that lead into a paying customer. So what we need to do is first, like, we really follow a full funnel approach when it comes to consumer retention, because for us retention is lead retention and conversion, like an aim towards conversion, right? So for us, we'll go through this whole process of first creating awareness, then developing that intent, right? Because once they get on board with us, we want to make sure that we understand what their challenges are. Is this a person that wants to prepare? Do they need practice material? How do we make sure they know that we have a free practice test available? How do they know which colleges the DT is accepted by? How do they go through the process of registering? What are the rules? How do they follow all of that, right? So we need to keep repeat targeting to that specific consumer so that they have all the information they need as they consider this process. But we also need to make sure that it's not bombarding them at one single touch point, because as they're doing their research, they're going through a journey. So they need to hear about us through multiple reliable sources around study abroad. And then eventually, when it's time to purchase, they know that we're the best option, right? So I think having a full funnel marketing approach is the best way to address retention, at least with the kind of way that my product operates. And I think a lot of companies that have a strong push notification strategy try to bring their consumer back. So they try to find what are the avenues that they liked, what worked for them. For a lot of e-commerce sites, they push a lot of discount to build loyalty. They have membership programs, right? Like these kind of things, I think, are ways to drive user
Hmm.
retention
That's right.
well.
That's right. Tara, you when you are creating your content strategy, you're looking at your different social media channels and growing those particular channels, communities within those social media, like say YouTube community. Now Instagram also, you can have a particular channel within that. We have all these options. WhatsApp channel was launched a few months back. So how do you kind of manage this whole plethora of the platforms and maintaining communities within that.
It's hard. I
Yeah,
mean, that's I think one of the big challenges, right?
yeah,
Because also the way content works on these platforms
yeah.
varies. So, like some of them will be great for short form, some of them vertical videos, some of them different things, right? So, I think it's a mix. So, what we try to do, right, is um, identify the long list of platforms that are relevant for you as well as a short list, right? So for us, for instance, and it varies from brand to brand, like some brands will want to be everywhere and they have the budgets to do it, right?
Hmm,
And then they will create localized individual content for each platform
hmm,
and program each platform separately, which is the ideal thing to do, right? Like
hmm,
it would be a perfect world if you could be on all social media platforms and create unique assets for each platform that's optimized to it. But that's a lot of money, right? Like to be able to create that volume of content, that volume of individual assets is very few companies have that kind of media might or a marketing budget. But I think for other platforms, for other brands, what you tend to do is identify the mix of what are the strongest platforms for your brand, right? So, for instance, for me, the core priorities are the English speaking platforms, number one, right? So, I don't need to be on the shared chats and Moj and, like whatever else is out there in terms of more hyper localized platforms. And I also don't need to be on the super fun platforms like Snap, which isn't used for search at all. But for me, Instagram and YouTube are the most important platforms because both of them have evolved almost from a search perspective, and they're both the platforms that are most active for my user base, right? So I probably create the most unique content for both YouTube and Instagram. And then the other platforms that I exist on, I create cut downs or some versions that suit the social media platforms based on that, right? I think you need to pick and choose in today's day and age, and then optimize your content for the platform that you're on, and then distribute via other platforms, which is not perfect, but at least it gives you one, a variety of content, a clear prioritization, and then hopefully strong content on the platforms you're prioritizing. The other thing that I think is an important note here is when we produce and create content, and especially when we review that content, we tend to review it on a laptop, right?
hmm.
Because that's the agency teams do it, the marketing teams do it. Majority of the people are consuming that content on the mobile phone. So it's like sometimes you actually don't know how your content will look in the medium that it's being consumed in.
Hmm,
So along with distribution plans, I think making sure that you're checking how your asset looks
hmm,
on the phone as well, even though you're not distributing it, and even if it's going to be horizontal,
hmm.
understand how it plays out on the
That's right.
mobile phone. 'Cause
Also, yeah, the mindset of the consumer, like say, you obviously you've made that content, you will be gravitating towards it, and you will see, certain aspects of it which others don't see, will be like self-admiring. But when a person is just kind of surfing through the thing, you have to understand that first 3 seconds, how do you take that guy's attention? Because you can't get lost in that. You are looking at, you will be interested in your own work, but then it has to have somebody, or third person views should be there, that it helps in other people, apart from your marketing team also, they have a look at that work apart from your, obviously, the boss and all. But I think that aspect is also definitely there. So Tara, how do you like? Obviously, it's not enough to just post a content out there and hope it kind of reaches maximum audience. There is a aspect of where you're paying also, right? Like you're promoting certain content so that it goes out there. So how do you balance that out as per the budgets of the company, or how does that whole process work?
it varies from company to company, right? It depends on what your priorities are, and then you break down your budget basis that. So it completely depends on what a company's priorities or
Hmm.
marketing priorities are.
That's right. But so, Tara, in the B2B space, do you feel that view or this thing is having that same as in a B2C space, where you have a target? Like if you put in that amount of money or effort or time in the content, that it should kind of reach out. Like you have a little bit of a paid push also should be there, or how do you work around that?
It's important. I think it depends on what the priority of your asset is, right?
Hmm.
So, what are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to achieve sales? Are you trying to achieve views? Are you trying to achieve engagement?
Hmm.
It varies. And what kind of brand are you, right? If
Hmm.
you're a mass brand, obviously the bigger the number,
Hmm.
the better. If you're a smaller brand, are you hitting your target audience, right? So I
Hmm.
think it depends on what your objective is.
Hmm.
And for each person that's creating a campaign or an asset, they should have that objective really clearly listed out before they go live. So then you know what you're going after. It shouldn't be like, oh yeah, let's see how it does and how many views it gets. It's
Yeah,
not just a
that's where the marketer comes in. Like, say, if your CEO comes to you and feel a great content piece will get this much views, you should show him the market realities. You should be aware of that. That a piece, however good, maybe it needs that paid push. Because as a marketer, okay, if I have responsibility for numbers, you have to know the reality that this content naturally will get these numbers and in a paid way will achieve. If that target is a certain higher amount that you are seeing, then you have to communicate that what is realistic, what is not. Awesome. So Tara, any you would like to talk about some campaign or any kind of collaborations that you have done and that worked out really well and you learned a lot from them?
one that comes to mind is the most recent campaign I've been running for the Duolingo English test, which is a collaboration with the movie Dunki, SRK and Red Chilli's film. And what was interesting for us was the connection between the study abroad landscape, right? It talks about migrating to London, and it talks about our competitors in the movie, right? Which is very rare to see a movie kind of talking about the English proficiency testing space, right? But it gave us a really strong opportunity to get on board as a brand sponsor towards the end. So we had a reactive response when we saw the trailer, and their team was very receptive to get us on board because they also saw the brand connection. And we were able to really create a very high ROI campaign for us, right, from a brand awareness perspective, because we were able to utilize Tapsi, SRK's, fandoms, and be a part of a large movies cultural moment, right? Like,
Hmm.
and be a part of that conversation, which isn't easy for a testing brand. So, at a relatively low investment in comparison to what you would spend to do this all on your own. It was a really meaningful collaboration for us and drove high results from a brand awareness perspective because it really got eyeballs and there was a strong brand connection where people understood the value of our product and what we were trying to say with this campaign.
That's right, Tara. So in this, it was. Could you explain, like, there was a product placement, or was it just the promos were used? How did this whole thing go on?
Mainly promos. So we were able to use, scenes from the film. We were able to use footage. We were able to have, some level of endorsement. Like I wouldn't call it endorsement from the actors, but we
But
had
they're
at least
talking about
each
it. They're
camera.
on camera. They are talking about this service
Exactly.
in
So
the
we had
promos as well.
Precap to that, and just we had a lot of social media chatter that sort of came out. We had influencers kind of do um, movie reviews, but then integrated our product into those movie reviews in a very seamless way.
Hmm.
And all of these had very high success metrics, right? In terms of engagement numbers, in terms of view numbers, in terms of people understanding. So it's not just about random engagement, it's about them seeing the connection between DET and what we're trying to say. And all of those outperformed in terms of what we were looking for.
That's right. Tara, the production companies today, they actively look at way they can collaborate with the brands, right? In terms of that is also extra revenue stream where you are bringing brands on board, and then in the maybe within the movie also and in the promos you cannot talk about it. They are actively okay. Okay, okay, awesome. Lastly, then Tara, there is an interesting, obviously, this is a question since you've obviously worked also in journalism and the entertainment industry that um, this, which is now like any kind of person in college now, he would want to become an influencer, and then that would lead, because first it was a goal was maybe work in movies or something in some capacity, but now it is maybe the route is through influencing, because obviously there are so many then avenues in influence, being an influencer, to then monetize that, and then you create more clout right in the market, where then maybe you're okay for projects or something. Not only as an actor, I've even heard it, the other professionals that are there, how they showcase their work, because at the end of the day it's all public work. So what would your advice be for the professionals? Firstly, maybe you look at the talents, how they can utilize their social media. Anything innovative you would like to tell them than the general just acting in reels or talking about some blogs or that kind of thing.
I can't speak too much about the ambition to be an actor or a creator and an influencer. That's a different ball game.
Mm,
But I think the part that I can talk about is personal branding,
mm,
and from a professional sense, right? So I think in today's day and age, we know it's a hyper competitive world out there, and especially with the things that technology is doing, people are replaceable. There's layoffs happening left, right, and center, and personal branding really helps you stand out. It's something that helps you break and create a fresh identity, or just create some more nuance around yourself, right? Like share more of your personality, showcase your skill sets
mm,
in ways that go beyond what you're doing at your company. And I think that helps build your profile.
mm,
So we're the biggest population in the world. We're one of the smartest populations out there, right? So that makes competition even stronger. And in today's day and age, if you're not standing out, from everybody else, it is going to be a hard market.
mm.
So I do think that personal branding has a lot of advantage in terms of what it does for your profile. But what I will also add as a caveat is do what's authentic to you, right? Because
True.
personal branding needs to be authentic. It needs to be true to who you are, and it shouldn't feel like something you're forced to do. So if it's not something that comes naturally to you, then not necessarily something you have to do. It is a definite advantage. But for instance, not everything works for everyone, right? So for me, I like LinkedIn as a pro. Sorry. For me, I like LinkedIn as a platform, and it works for me because I like to write and I like to sort of put out my thoughts and my insights and projects that I'm working for you. In your case, you like doing a podcast, and you're able to sort of build your credibility in the space and network via the podcast that you're doing, right? So I think each person kind of identifies what their sweet spot is, but it is important in some shape or form. So it doesn't have to be on social media, but it should be something that you think about as you progress in your career, because it is a differentiator.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, my opinion, like the talent aspect of it, obviously everything is out there. Like you're showcasing yourself, your acting based, or your you have your show reels, your photo shoots, and all that. But I think it has to kind of go beyond that, where you are talking about current topics, certain issues, interacting with other people in your domain. That has to be a part of your content, even if you are like a mainstream getting into that. I would say, because that has become too common. Like unless in that aspect, like you are like the best looking person and all, that's a different thing. But if you're not in that, then it's kind of you, how do you utilize your content about yourself and interacting with something topical, what people can learn from, something you feel strongly about in society, and that also is building your brand. uh, yeah, that's right. That's right. And the people obviously in media entertainment behind the scenes, there's so much, like, because we are not seeing it on camera. So how do you cover? Like I've seen a lot of say cinematographer or person who is even a makeup professional. They show, they shoot their whole journey within that, how they and their regular day, how it looks like, their opinion on things in the industry, and they've made big channels out of it, right? So there is lot, and there is a lot of interest in that domain behind the scene, for especially in the entertainment world. So yeah, that is, I would feel, they can work, and that if they become big in that, that becomes, you become then the face of your own channel or whatever in within that field. That's awesome. So Tara, like, so you personally, in terms of utilizing, apart from just maybe posting a little bit on LinkedIn, like how have you been, like going maybe on podcast, or having a lectures, or presenting in front of some kind of audience who've invited you, and how are you taking your personal branding journey?
Like I said, is authentic to me.
Mm,
So I like to talk about spaces that I know well, right? I know marketing well. So I like to talk about those kind of things. I know what challenges I've had over the course of my career. So I do like to mentor people when I have the opportunity or the time. And then, as and when opportunities come up, I kind of evaluate them and see what the intention is and what is the
Hmm.
purpose, and does it have a win-win situation on both sides of the party. And
Hmm.
if it does, then usually it's something that I would go ahead with. But I don't have too much of a strategy around it. It's kind of just
But you're
what.
like, at least your eyes and ears are open towards something coming away,
Yeah,
then you
and what I'm
evaluating it.
interested
Yeah,
in. Yeah, I do things that I'm interested in for sure.
that's it. Awesome. I think then it's been a great podcast interaction here with Tara. I had a lot of fun interacting about different aspects of content, your journey in journalism, also entertainment industry, and a lot of things that you have done. Also, recently you talked about in the Duolingo English test. So awesome. Thanks a lot. Thanks for your time, Tara. Anything, just like say the closing words about content marketing. What do you feel going forward? Any kind of trend you see, or what we should follow with AI? How you have to utilize it? Because with the AI, it's coming. The expectations have increased in terms of volume and quality of content. So even it's not like an
Absolutely.
easy journey still with AI, right? So what? Any closing words on that?
Yeah, I think my only closing thing would be just have a learner's mindset, right? Be willing to learn, willing to see what's happening out there, because it's ever evolving. And the good part about that is that nobody knows because it's new, right? So if you're willing to learn and you're willing to read and listen and see what's out there, then you should have some success.
Awesome. So, to the audience, thank you so much for joining us. Many such interesting podcasts coming up on the MI podcast. You can please go and follow us on Spotify and all the major podcast platforms, and also go along on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel, and you'll get all the updates. If you want to be part of a podcast, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. Thank you. Thanks for your time. I'll see you all. Take care.